August 6th, 1945. In a single flash, an entire village disappears. Over 70,000 people gone instantly. 3 days later, it happens again. By the end of that year, more than 200,000 people are dead. 2 bombs, 2 cities, and hundreds of thousands of lives gone. But what if those bombs actually saved millions of lives? The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are unquestionably some of the most controversial decisions made in human history. To some, they were unnecessary acts of destruction and genocide. To others, they were the brutal but necessary end to the deadliest war ever fought. Today, we're going to examine the facts, the deaths, the alternatives, and the realities of World War II, and ask one difficult question. Did the atomic bombings save more lives than they took? Let's start with the undeniable truth. These bombings were devastating. Hiroshima, roughly 90,000 to 166,000 deaths within just a matter of months. Nagasaki, roughly 60,000 to about 80,000 deaths. Combined, that's approximately 150,000 to 246,000 deaths. And most of these were not instantaneous deaths. Many suffered burns, radiation sickness, very slow deaths that took weeks and months. Entire families were erased. Cities reduced to ash. There's no minimizing this. But to understand the decision that U.S. President Harry Truman was faced with, we have to zoom out. By 1945, World War II had already become the deadliest conflict in human history. Total deaths, around 85 million people worldwide. And that's not just soldiers. That's civilians, that's bombings, famine, and genocide. Now, here's where things get critical. At the height of the war, people were dying at an almost unimaginable rate. Historians estimate that in the final years of the war, tens of thousands of people were dying every single day. Let that sink in. Every day the war continued, a Hiroshima's worth of deaths was unfolding globally. By mid-1945, Japan had already lost the war strategically, but not psychologically. The Japanese military doctrine was simple: fight to the last man. We saw this in battles like Okinawa. Over 100,000 Japanese soldiers died. Massive civilian casualties. Widespread suicides rather than surrender. And the Allies knew something terrifying. An invasion of mainland Japan would be way worse. The planned invasion of Japan, called Operation Downfall, was already in motion. And the estimates? They were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of American casualties. Possibly millions of Japanese deaths, both military and civilian. Why? Because Japan was preparing their entire population to fight. Civilians were being trained with bamboo sticks. They were being trained in suicide tactics. This would not have been a clean military operation. This would have been a nationwide bloodbath. Additionally, in 1952, the U.S.'s occupation of Japan came to an end, basically meaning Japan regained its sovereignty. U.S. troops were stationed for 7 years after the war in Japan. No killing, no harm, nothing bad. We essentially put them on a 7-year timeout. In 1951, Japan signed the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty. Throughout the 1950s, trade between the U.S. and Japan was getting better and better year by year. In 1960, the alliance was further strengthened by the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security, which allowed for equal trade between the U.S. and Japan. This is mostly electronics, cars, things like that. By this point, our relationship was not just stable, it was interdependent. By the mid-1960s, Japan became one of our biggest allies. Tourism between the U.S. and Japan was higher than it ever was. Things were going really well between the U.S. and Japan. This very strongly reflects that despite the dropping of the bombs, our relationship with Japan not only got back to where it was before the war, but it was way better than it ever had been. There is one caveat worth mentioning. For anyone who's seen Oppenheimer, there were two specific concerns before the dropping of the bombs that the US had. First, we thought Japan didn't have access to an atomic bomb, but we weren't sure. If they did, they could have just as easily flattened Los Angeles, San Francisco, any of our biggest cities. The second, a very real concern that when they detonated the bomb, when the explosion occurred, it would set off a chain reaction in the Earth's atmosphere, essentially causing the entire atmosphere to catch fire, ending all of humanity, all life on planet Earth. So at the time, an argument definitely could have been made that that was too big of a risk to take. However, fortunately, neither happened, obviously, and the best possible outcome is exactly what transpired. There was an average of about 1 million deaths per month throughout all of World War II, with 200,000 being the total death count between the dropping of both bombs. That means more people were dying per week throughout all of World War II than died in total in the dropping of both bombs together. No invasion, no prolonged fighting, no additional months of death. The bombs didn't just destroy cities. They forced an immediate end to a war that was killing tens of thousands of people per day. So now we arrive at the central question. If the bombs killed 200,000 people, but prevented millions, possibly tens of millions of more deaths, what does that mean? Within days of the second bomb being dropped, Japan surrendered and World War II came to an end. Statistically speaking, there was an average of about 1 million deaths per month throughout all of World War II. And just to clarify, this does not mean that the bombings were good. It doesn't erase the suffering, the deaths, and any of the cruelty. But history is not always between good and evil. Sometimes it's about choosing between horrible and even worse. So what do you think? Did the atomic bombings save lives, or were they an unnecessary tragedy? History gives us the facts, but the judgment, that's up to you. Thanks so much for taking a few minutes to watch this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I love making this kind of content. I'm obviously very early on in my stage of making content in this niche, so I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about it. So comment below if you agree, if you disagree, anything that you want to hear me talk about specifically. But otherwise, give this video a like, share it to someone who you think might also be interested in this, and please hit the subscribe button.